The divorce papers landed on my kitchen table right next to the birthday cake, and I knew my life had just turned into a Stephen King novel, the kind where the monster lives in your own house and shares your last name. "Happy 40th, Cole," Ivy said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she slid the manila envelope across the scratched oak surface. "I got you something special this year. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I stared at the papers, then at the chocolate cake with its cheerful red candles, then at my wife of 12 years. Ivy Marin, she'd kept her maiden name, always said Rankin sounded too blue-collar for her real estate aspirations. Standing behind her, grinning like a hyena at an all-you-can-eat buffet, was her sister, Greta Shields, phone already out and recording. "This is going to be so good for the family group chat," Greta giggled, zooming in on my face. "Cole's big birthday surprise." I took a slow sip of my coffee, buying time to process what was happening. 40 years old today, and my wife was serving me papers like I was some lockbeat she'd finally worked up the courage to dump. The funny thing was, I wasn't even surprised. Hurt, sure. Pissed off, absolutely. But surprised? Not really. "So this is how we're doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "On my birthday? With your sister here to document the humiliation?" Ivy's mask slipped for just a second, and I caught a glimpse of the cold calculation underneath. "I thought it would be memorable." "Oh, it's memorable, all right." I flipped through the papers, noting the date. She'd filed 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks of morning kisses and, "How was your day, honey?" while she planned this little performance. Irreconcilable differences, that's creative. What exactly are these differences, Ivy? The fact that I work construction while you sell houses? The fact that I drink beer instead of wine? Or is it something else entirely? Greta's phone was still rolling, catching every word. I could see the excitement in her eyes. This was better than reality TV for her. "Don't be dramatic, Cole," Ivy said, but her voice wavered slightly. "We've grown apart. We want different things. You know this hasn't been working for months." I laughed, short and bitter. "Months? Try years, sweetheart. But here's what's interesting." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my own envelope. "I've got something for you too. Call it a birthday gift to myself." The color drained from Greta's face as I slid a stack of photos across the table. Her husband Owen's BMW in the driveway of the Ocean View Motel. Owen and Ivy walking into room 237 last Tuesday afternoon. Owen and Ivy leaving the same room 2 hours later, Ivy's hair messed up and her blouse wrinkled. "What the hell is this?" Greta whispered, her phone forgotten in her trembling hand. "Your husband," I said simply. "With my wife. Every Tuesday and Friday for the past 3 months. Funny thing about small Maine towns, everybody knows everybody's business. Especially when you're stupid enough to use the same motel room every time." Ivy's face went white, then red, then white again. "Cole, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. "The pictures explain everything. But here's the really interesting part, Greta. Check your husband's phone. Look for the texts from your sister, specifically the ones about how you're such a boring prude and how Owen deserves better than a frigid wife who won't even try new things in bed." Greta's phone clattered to the floor as she lunged for Ivy. "You liar! You absolute liar!" I leaned back in my chair watching the show. 12 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with my wife and her sister clawing at each other over my kitchen table while my birthday cake sat forgotten between the divorce papers and the evidence of adultery. "Ladies, please," I said mildly. "You're going to ruin the cake." Greta was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she called Owen's number with shaking fingers. Ivy was trying to grab the photos, but I'd already pulled them back. "Cole, please," Ivy begged. "Don't do this. We can work something out. I made a mistake." The only mistake here was mine, I said, standing up and walking to the basement door. I should have done this months ago. I'd been preparing for this day longer than Ivy realized. The basement workshop where I kept my tools and plans had become my war room. Financial records, bank statements, photographs, phone records, everything I'd need when this moment finally came. "Where are you going?" Ivy called after me. I paused at the top of the basement stairs and looked back at the chaos in my kitchen. Greta was screaming at someone on the phone, probably Owen, judging by the creative profanity. Ivy was frantically trying to gather up the photos I'd left on the table, as if that would somehow undo what she'd done. "I'm going to get the rest of your birthday present," I said. "The cake's ruined and so are you. But we're just getting started." The basement was cool and quiet, a refuge from the drama upstairs. I'd spent countless evenings down here over the past few months, planning and preparing for this exact scenario. Mick, my foreman, had helped me set up a filing system that would make an accountant weep with joy. Every receipt, every bank statement, every suspicious charge on our joint credit cards, all organized and ready for battle. My phone buzzed with a text from Deb, our part-time bookkeeper who knew every secret in this godforsaken town. "Heard screaming from your place. Everything okay?" I typed back. "Better than okay. The war just started." The next morning, I drove my pickup to the office, a converted boathouse down by the harbor that Mick and I had turned into the headquarters for Rankin Construction. The smell of salt air and diesel fuel was comforting after the perfume and betrayal atmosphere of my house. Mick was already there, coffee in hand, looking like he'd been waiting for this conversation for months. At 55, he was built like a brick wall and had the loyalty of a golden retriever. He'd worked for me since I started the business 8 years ago, and he could read my moods better than my wife ever could. "So," he said without preamble, "how bad is it?" "Divorce papers yesterday, on my birthday, with her sister recording it for entertainment." Mick winced. "Jesus, Cole. That's cold even for Ivy." "Gets better. She's been screwing Greta's husband for 3 months. Owen Shields?" Mick's face darkened. "Owen had tried to stiff us on a bathroom renovation last year, claiming our work was substandard when really he just didn't want to pay." "That smarmy piece of garbage?" "The very same." I pulled out the files I'd brought from home. "Here's where it gets interesting. Remember those business expenses Ivy's been charging to our joint account? The ones for her real estate career?" Mick flipped through the bank statements, his expression growing darker with each page. "Motel rooms, fancy dinners, lingerie from some boutique in Portland. This isn't business, Cole. This is her affair on your dime." $23,000 over 6 months, I said. "She's been using our money to fund her relationship with Owen while telling me we need to cut back on expenses." The office door chimed, and Deb walked in with a box of donuts and the kind of expression that meant she had gossip to share. At 62, Deb O'Connor knew everyone in town and had a memory like a steel trap for scandal. She'd been doing our books part-time since we opened, and she was worth her weight in gold for information alone. "Morning, boys," she said, setting down the donuts. "Heard there was some excitement at the Rankin house yesterday." "News travels fast," I said. "Mrs. O'Hara called me at 6 this morning, said she heard screaming and saw Greta Shields leave your place crying like someone passed away." Deb poured herself coffee from our ancient pot. "Also said she's been noticing Ivy's car missing a lot lately, Tuesday and Friday afternoons specifically." I exchanged a look with Mick. "What else has Mrs. O'Hara noticed?" "Owen Shields' BMW parked behind the old Morrison house on Elm Street. You know, the one that's been empty since the owner moved to Florida. Perfect view of the back entrance to the Ocean View Motel." Mick laughed grimly. "They thought they were being sneaky. In a town of 4,000 people?" Deb snorted. "Honey, you can't sneeze in this place without 3 people offering you tissues and 2 more asking if you're coming down with what's going around." I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Ivy thought she was so clever, so sophisticated compared to her blue-collar husband. but she'd underestimated the power of small-town gossip and the loyalty of people who actually gave a damn about me. "Deb," I said carefully, "hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make sure certain information reached the right people in town, how would they go about that?" Her eyes lit up with understanding. "Hypothetically? Well, the Ladies' Auxiliary meets tomorrow night. The Rotary Club meets Thursday. And there's the big family fun day at the park this Saturday. Half the town will be there. And if someone had, say, photographic evidence of certain activities? Honey, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a picture with witnesses is worth 1,000,000. She leaned forward conspiratorially. "What do you need?" I was about to answer when my phone rang. Ivy's name on the screen made my jaw clench. "Don't answer it," Mick advised. "Oh, I'm answering it." I hit the speaker button. "Morning, dear. How's married life treating you today?" "Cole, please. We need to talk. What happened yesterday? It got out of hand. Greta's filing for divorce, Owen's panicking, and I think we can work through this if we just—" "Work through what exactly?" I interrupted. "The part where you've been stealing from our joint account to fund your affair? The part where you humiliated me on my birthday? Or the part where you called your sister a frigid prude in text messages to her husband?" Silence on the other end. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Here's how this is going to work, Ivy. You wanted a divorce? Congratulations, you're getting one. But it's going to be on my terms, not yours. Cole, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you could blindside me, take half of everything I've worked for, and ride off into the sunset with Owen. But you forgot one thing. I'm not the same pushover you married 12 years ago. I built this business from nothing, and I didn't do it by rolling over when people tried to screw me." I hung up and looked at Deb and Mick. They were both grinning. "So," Deb said, "what's the plan?" "First, we document everything. Every financial transaction, every lie, every betrayal. Then we make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people Ivy and Owen really are." "And then?" Mick asked. I thought about Ivy's shocked face when I'd shown her the photos, about Greta's tears when she realized her husband had been cheating with her own sister, about Owen's smug expression every time I'd seen him around town, probably thinking he was so much better than the construction worker whose wife he was screwing. Then we show them what happens when you mess with the wrong guy. The rest of the morning was spent organizing evidence and planning strategy. Deb made copies of everything: bank statements, photos, phone records that Mick had helped me obtain through perfectly legal means. We created a timeline of the affair, cross-referenced with financial records that showed exactly how much of my money they'd spent on their relationship. Around noon, I decided to take a drive. Officially, I was checking on a job site. Unofficially, I wanted to see if I could catch Ivy and Owen in their natural habitat. The Ocean View Motel was a dump that had seen better days sometime around 1975, the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen, which made it perfect for cheating spouses and drug dealers. I parked across the street behind a delivery truck and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:47, Owen's BMW pulled into the lot, followed 2 minutes later by Ivy's Honda. They didn't even try to hide it, just parked side by side like they owned the place. I pulled out my phone and started recording as they walked to room 237. Owen had his hand on Ivy's back, possessive and casual. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. The sight should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt that cold satisfaction growing stronger. They had no idea I was watching. No idea that their little secret was about to become very public knowledge. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop following us or you'll regret it." I looked around the parking lot but didn't see anyone watching me. The text had to be from Owen. Probably spotted my truck and decided to play tough guy. I typed back, looking forward to it. Saturday's family fun day at Riverside Park was one of those community events that brought out everyone in town. Families with kids, elderly couples, teenagers looking for somewhere to hang out, and local business owners schmoozing for customers. Perfect for what I had planned. I arrived early with Mick and Deb, setting up our company tent near the main pavilion. Rankin Construction was a sponsor, which gave us a prime location and a legitimate reason to talk to everyone who passed by. "You sure about this?" Mick asked as he helped me hang our banner. "Once this gets out, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure," I said, checking my watch. Ivy and Owen would be here soon. Greta had mentioned at the ladies' auxiliary meeting that the whole family was coming. Of course, Greta was no longer speaking to either of them, but old habits are strong. Deb was in her element, working the crowd like a professional politician. She had a gift for steering conversations exactly where she wanted them to go, and today she was using that gift to plant seeds about Ivy and Owen's relationship. "Such a shame about the Shields' marriage," I heard her telling Mrs. Patterson from the bank. "Apparently Owen's been carrying on with his sister-in-law for months, using the poor girl's own money to pay for motel rooms, if you can believe it." Mrs. Patterson's eyes went wide. "You don't mean Ivy Marin?" "I'm afraid so, and on her husband's birthday no less. Served him divorce papers right there at his kitchen table while her sister recorded it for laughs." The story spread through the crowd like wildfire. By the time Ivy showed up with Owen in tow, half the town was already whispering and pointing. I watched from our tent as they made their way through the crowd, trying to maintain their composure while people stared and whispered. Ivy had always cared about appearances, about what people thought of her. This was hurting her. Owen, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the attention. He strutted through the park like he owned it, one hand possessively on Ivy's back, nodding to people he recognized. The arrogance was breathtaking. "Showtime," Mick murmured as they approached our area. I stepped out from behind the tent just as Owen spotted me. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, then a smug satisfaction that made my hands clench into fists. "Well, well," Owen said loudly enough for nearby families to hear. "If it isn't the ex-husband, how's the construction business, Cole? Still playing in the dirt for a living?" Several people turned to watch. I could see Ivy tugging on Owen's arm, trying to get him to move along, but he was enjoying himself too much. "Business is good," I replied calmly. "Amazing how much work you get when people trust you. Trust is important in a small town, don't you think?" Owen's smile faltered slightly, but he pressed on. "I'm sure it is. Of course, some of us have moved on to more sophisticated pursuits." "Like real estate?" I asked innocently. "I hear that's a relationship-based business, all about knowing the right people, building the right connections." "Exactly." Owen puffed up with pride. "It's about understanding what people really want, what they're willing to pay for. Not everyone can appreciate the finer things." "Speaking of paying for things," I said, pulling out my phone, "I've been meaning to ask Ivy about some charges on our joint account. Maybe you can help explain them since you seem to know so much about her business expenses." The color drained from Ivy's face. "Cole, don't—" But I was already showing the phone screen to the growing crowd of onlookers. Bank statements, motel receipts, restaurant charges, all time-stamped and organized. "See, this is interesting," I continued conversationally. $23,000 in business expenses over 6 months. But here's the funny thing. According to her real estate office, Ivy hasn't closed a single sale in that time period. So what exactly was she spending the money on? Owen tried to grab my phone, but Mick stepped between us. At 6'4" and built like a linebacker, Mick was an effective deterrent. "That's private information," Owen snarled. "You have no right—" "I have every right," I said. "It's my money. Money I earned working construction while my wife was building business relationships at the Ocean View Motel every Tuesday and Friday afternoon." The crowd was growing larger now, drawn by the drama. I could see phones coming out, people recording the confrontation. In the age of social media, this would be all over town within hours. "You're lying," Owen said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? I swiped to the photos on my phone. Because I've got pictures that say otherwise. Your BMW in the motel parking lot. You and Ivy walking into room 237. The same room every time, paid for with my credit card. Ivy was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized how completely she'd been exposed. Please, Cole. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. You should have thought of that before you decided to humiliate me on my birthday, I replied, in front of your sister, while she recorded it for the family group chat. Owen made another lunge for my phone, and this time I let him get close enough to grab my wrist. Then I twisted my arm sharply, using a move Mick had taught me years ago, and Owen found himself face down on the grass with his arm bent at an uncomfortable angle. Here's the thing about construction work, I said conversationally as Owen struggled beneath me. It builds character and strength, and it teaches you how to deal with people who try to screw you over. I released him and stood up, brushing dirt off my hands. Owen scrambled to his feet, his face red with humiliation and rage. This isn't over, he hissed. You're right, I agreed. It's not. Monday morning brought the kind of satisfaction that made getting out of bed worthwhile. I was having coffee at Murphy's Diner when Deb slid into the booth across from me, practically vibrating with excitement. You're not going to believe what happened, she said, pulling out her phone. Owen's car got vandalized last night. Someone dumped fish guts all over it inside and out. The smell is so bad they had to tow it to Portland for professional cleaning. I tried to look surprised. That's terrible. Who would do such a thing? Oh, it gets better. Whoever did it also left a rotten lobster in the trunk with a note that said, "Thanks for the memories. Room 237. The whole thing's on Facebook. Greta posted the pictures with a caption about karma being a snake. I pulled up Facebook on my phone and had to bite back a laugh. The photos were spectacular. Owen's pristine BMW covered in rotting fish parts, the interior completely destroyed, and Owen himself standing next to it looking like he might cry. Any idea who might have done it? I asked innocently. Well, let's see. Someone with access to fish guts, someone who knows about the motel room, someone with a grudge against Owen. Deb grinned. Could be anyone in town, really. Half the people at the park yesterday have been sharing those photos you showed them. My phone rang, Ivy's number again. I'd been getting calls from her every few hours since Saturday, but I hadn't answered any of them. You should probably take that, Deb said. She sounded pretty desperate when she called the office this morning. I hit the speaker button. Morning, Ivy. How's life in paradise? Cole, please, I'm begging you. Call off whatever you're doing. Owen's car, the photos, the gossip. It has to stop. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said truthfully. I hadn't vandalized Owen's car, though I had my suspicions about who did. Mick had some very loyal friends among the local fishing community. Don't lie to me. I know this is you. Actually, it's not me. It's karma. Turns out when you screw over half the town, eventually it comes back to bite you. What do you want? Ivy's voice was breaking. Money? I'll pay back every penny. Just make it stop. What I want is for you to understand something, I said, my voice hardening. You thought you could humiliate me, steal from me, and walk away clean. You thought I was just some dumb construction worker who'd roll over and take whatever you dished out. You were wrong. Cole, I'm not finished. You want to know what I really want? I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of person you are. I want them to know that you spent months lying to my face while you screwed your sister's husband with my money. I want them to know that you're the kind of person who serves divorce papers on someone's birthday for entertainment. Silence on the other end. And here's the beautiful part, Ivy. I don't have to do anything else. The truth has a way of spreading all by itself in a place like this. You and Owen are finished in this town. Your reputation, your business, your relationships, all of it. Gone. I hung up and looked at Deb, who was staring at me with something like admiration. Remind me never to get on your bad side, she said. The rest of the week played out like a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction. Ivy's real estate office launched an internal investigation after someone, not me, but I had my suspicions about Deb's network of friends, sent them copies of the bank statements showing misuse of company resources. Owen's construction business started hemorrhaging clients as word spread about his character. Greta's divorce attorney was having a field day with the evidence of adultery and financial impropriety. By Friday, the whole thing had reached a crescendo that even I hadn't anticipated. I was at the office when Mick burst through the door with a newspaper in his hand. "Have you seen this?" he asked, spreading the local paper across my desk. The headline made me laugh out loud. "Local real estate assistant fired for misconduct." Below it was a photo of Ivy looking haggard and defeated as she cleaned out her desk. "Gets better," Mick said, flipping to page 3. "Look at this." Another headline: Shields Construction loses major contract amid scandal. The article detailed how Owen's biggest client had pulled a $200,000 renovation project after learning about his personal conduct issues. "And this," Mick continued, turning to the opinion page where someone had written a letter to the editor titled, "The Importance of Character in Small Business." I read the letter, recognizing Deb's writing style even though it was signed with a pseudonym. It was a masterpiece of subtle character assassination, discussing the importance of trust and integrity in business relationships without mentioning any names. But everyone in town would know exactly who it was about. "Jesus," I said, "this is better than I hoped." "It's not over yet," Mick said. Deb heard from her friend at the bank that Owen's been trying to get a loan to cover his lost contracts. Turns out banks don't like lending money to people whose names are all over the local paper for adultery and business misconduct. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You win. We're leaving town. I hope you're satisfied." I showed the message to Mick, who grinned. "Owen? Has to be. Ivy's too proud to admit defeat that directly." But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. There was still one more piece of business to take care of. One final humiliation that would put the perfect cap on this whole affair. Saturday night at Murphy's Tavern was always busy, but tonight felt different. There was an electric anticipation in the air, like the whole town was waiting for something to happen. I walked in with Mick and Deb, and conversation stopped as people turned to look at us. "Well, well," called out Jimmy Murphy from behind the bar. "If it isn't the man of the hour. First round's on the house, Cole." I was halfway to the bar when the door opened behind us. Ivy walked in, looking like hell, but trying to maintain some dignity. The entire bar went quiet. She walked straight up to me, ignoring the stares and whispers. "I want to talk to you. Alone." "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of everyone," I replied. "After all, you didn't seem to mind having an audience when you served me divorce papers." "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you to have some decency, some mercy." I looked around the bar at the faces watching us, friends, neighbors, customers, people who'd known me for years, people who'd watched Ivy treat me like I was beneath her, who'd heard her make snide comments about my job and my background. "Mercy?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You want mercy? Where was your mercy when you were spending my money on motel rooms? Where was your mercy when you were laughing with Owen about what a fool I was? Where was your mercy on my birthday?" Ivy's composure finally cracked completely. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. What more do you want?" "What I want," I said, stepping closer, "is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You thought you could treat people like garbage and walk away clean. You thought being pretty and charming would protect you from the results of your choices. You were wrong." "So this is it?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to destroy my entire life over a mistake?" "I didn't destroy your life, Ivy. You did. I just made sure everyone could see what you really are." She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist easily. "You don't get to touch me anymore. I said quietly. Not your birthday, not your party, not your ending. The bar erupted in cheers and applause as Ivy fled toward the door. I watched her go, feeling a satisfaction so complete it was almost overwhelming. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy called out, I think this calls for a toast to Cole Rankin, a man who proves that sometimes the good guys do win. The crowd raised their glasses, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: respect, not just from others, but from myself. The divorce hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday in the county courthouse, a grim brick building that had seen its share of human drama over the years. I arrived early with my attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Keene, who specialized in cases involving financial misconduct and adultery. Are you ready for this? Patricia asked as we walked up the courthouse steps. Ivy's attorney is going to try to paint you as vindictive and controlling. They'll argue that your public campaign against her constitutes harassment. Let them try, I said. I've got documentation for everything. The courtroom was surprisingly full for a divorce hearing. Word had gotten around town, and apparently half the population had decided to take a long lunch break to watch the proceedings. I spotted Deb in the gallery, along with Mick, Mrs. O'Hara, Jimmy Murphy, and at least 20 other familiar faces. Ivy sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a nervous-looking man named Davidson who kept shuffling through papers like he was looking for something that wasn't there. She'd tried to clean herself up for court, but she still looked haggard and defeated. Owen was nowhere to be seen. According to Deb's intelligence network, he'd left town 3 days ago, supposedly to explore business opportunities in another state. More likely, he'd run away rather than face the consequences of his actions. Judge Margaret Hartwell called the court to order, and Davidson immediately launched into his strategy. Your Honor, my client is seeking a fair and equitable division of marital assets. However, she's been subjected to a campaign of harassment and public humiliation by the defendant that goes far beyond the bounds of reasonable behavior. Can you be more specific, Counselor? Judge Hartwell asked. The defendant has deliberately and maliciously spread private information about my client throughout the community, causing severe damage to her reputation and career. He's orchestrated a systematic campaign of objection, Patricia interrupted. Is counsel alleging that telling the truth constitutes harassment? Sustained, Judge Hartwell said dryly. Mr. Davidson, do you have evidence that the defendant spread false information about your client? Davidson fumbled with his papers. Well, no, Your Honor, but the manner in which he, what, documented his wife's adultery, showed evidence of financial misconduct? Mr. Davidson, if your client didn't want her behavior to become public knowledge, perhaps she shouldn't have engaged in that behavior. I had to bite back a smile. Judge Hartwell was known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, and she clearly had little patience for Ivy's victim act. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of the plaintiff's financial misconduct during the marriage. What followed was a methodical destruction of Ivy's case. Bank records showing $23,000 in unauthorized expenditures. Credit card statements detailing motel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts, all paid for with marital funds and all clearly related to her affair with Owen. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Ivy and Owen during work hours. The coup de grace came when Patricia called Greta Shields to the stand. Mrs. Shields, what is your relationship to the plaintiff? She's my sister, Greta said, her voice cold as Arctic wind. And are you familiar with her relationship with your husband, Owen Shields? Unfortunately, yes. They've been having an affair for months. I found out when Cole showed me the evidence. Did the plaintiff ever discuss her marriage to the defendant with you? Greta's expression hardened. She used to complain about Cole constantly, called him boring, said he was beneath her, said she deserved better than a blue-collar nobody. She said she was planning to divorce him and take half of everything he'd worked for. Did she express any remorse for her affair? None whatsoever. In fact, she bragged about it. Said Cole was too stupid to figure out what was happening right under his nose. I watched Ivy's face crumple as her own sister testified against her. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's pen. No further questions, Patricia said. Davidson's cross-examination was a disaster. Every question he asked just gave Greta another opportunity to detail Ivy's callousness and deception. By the time he sat down, even he looked like he wanted to distance himself from his client. Judge Hartwell called a brief recess, and I stepped outside for some air. The courthouse steps were crowded with people from town, all of them wanting to know how things were going. "She's getting what she deserves," Mrs. O'Hara said with satisfaction. "Always thought she was too good for this town, too good for you. Well, now she knows better." When court reconvened, Judge Hartwell delivered her ruling with the efficiency of a surgeon. Based on the evidence presented, I find that the plaintiff engaged in adultery and financial misconduct during the marriage. The defendant is awarded the marital home, the business, and all associated assets. The plaintiff is responsible for all debts incurred during her extramarital affair, including credit card charges and legal fees. Ivy's attorney tried to object, but Judge Hartwell cut him off. Furthermore, I'm ordering the plaintiff to pay restitution to the defendant in the amount of $23,000 for misappropriated marital funds, plus interest and legal costs. This court does not look favorably on spouses who steal from their partners to fund adultery. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot, and it was over. 12 years of marriage dissolved in less than 4 hours, with Ivy walking away with nothing but debt and a reputation in ruins. As people filed out of the courtroom, I caught sight of Ivy slumped in her chair, staring at the table in front of her like she couldn't quite believe what had happened. "Cole," she called out as I passed her table. I stopped and turned back. "I know you hate me," she said quietly. "But we had some good times, didn't we? In the beginning?" I thought about it for a moment. The early years when we were young and hopeful, before her ambition and dissatisfaction poisoned everything between us. "Yeah," I said finally. "We did. But you threw all that away the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you. I never said—" "You didn't have to say it, Ivy. You showed me every day for years. The way you looked at me, talked about my work, introduced me to your friends. I was an embarrassment to you, a mistake you were stuck with until you could find something better." She started to cry again, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no lingering affection. Just a cold satisfaction that justice had finally been served. "The difference between us," I continued, "is that I built something real. My business, my reputation, my relationships with people in this town. You just took and took and took until there was nothing left to take. And now everyone can see exactly what you are." I walked away without looking back. That evening, Murphy's Tavern was packed beyond capacity. Word of the court ruling had spread through town like wildfire, and it seemed like everyone wanted to buy me a drink and hear the details firsthand. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out as I walked through the door. "No speeches," I said, but I was grinning. Just drinks and good company. Jimmy Murphy had set up a special menu for the occasion: the Justice Burger, Karma Nachos, and something called the Owen Special, fish and chips served with a side of regret. Mick was holding court at the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with stories about Owen's humiliation. "You should have seen his face when that rotten lobster fell out of his trunk," he was saying. "Thought he was going to faint right there in the parking lot." Deb was at a corner table with a group of ladies from the auxiliary, no doubt planning how to spread the news to anyone in town who might have missed it. Her phone was out, and I could see her typing furiously, probably updating her Facebook status with a play-by-play of the court proceedings. "Cole." Patricia Keene appeared at my elbow with a beer in her hand. "Hell of a case. I've been practicing family law for 15 years, and I've never seen such a complete victory." "Couldn't have done it without you," I said. raising my bottle in a toast. Actually, you could have. You had everything documented so thoroughly that I barely needed to do anything except present the evidence. Most clients come to me with nothing but hurt feelings and suspicions. You came with a paper trail that would make the FBI jealous. The door opened, and I was surprised to see Detective Monahan walk in. He was technically retired, but he still kept an eye on things around town, and he'd been my neighbor for the past 5 years. "Heard you had quite a day," he said, joining our conversation. "Justice was served," I replied. "That it was, though I have to say, some of the methods used to bring that justice about were creative." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." Monahan smiled. "Of course you don't. Just like you don't know anything about the fish guts in Owen's car, or how certain financial documents found their way to Ivy's employer, or who might have suggested to the newspaper that they look into local business ethics. Sounds like the work of concerned citizens to me," I said. "Concerned citizens with very good organizational skills and an impressive network of information sources." He raised his beer. "Here's to concerned citizens." As the evening wore on, the crowd grew larger and louder. People kept coming up to me with stories about Ivy and Owen's behavior over the years. Snide comments, unpaid bills, broken promises, general arrogance. It seemed like half the town had been waiting for this moment. Around 10 o'clock, the door opened one last time, and a hush fell over the bar. Ivy walked in, looking like she'd been through hell. She'd clearly been crying, her makeup was smeared, and her hair was disheveled. She walked straight up to me, ignoring the stares and whispers from everyone in the bar. "I came to say goodbye," she said quietly. "I'm leaving town tomorrow. There's nothing left for me here." "Where will you go?" I asked, genuinely curious. "My cousin in California said I could stay with her until I get back on my feet. Start over somewhere nobody knows me." The bar was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was watching this final confrontation between the woman who'd tried to destroy me and the man who'd turned the tables on her. "I want you to know," she continued, "that I understand now. What I did to you, what I put you through, it was wrong. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for all of it." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd shared my life for 12 years before deciding I wasn't worth her time. She looked broken, defeated, completely stripped of the arrogance and entitlement that had defined her for so long. "Apology noted," I said finally. She nodded and turned to go, but I called her name. "Ivy." She looked back. "Next time you decide someone isn't good enough for you, make sure you're right. Because if you're wrong, you might find out that you're the one who isn't good enough." She left without another word, and the bar exploded into cheers and applause. Jimmy Murphy climbed up on the bar and raised his voice over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Cole Rankin, a man who proves that in the end character matters more than anything else." The cheers grew even louder, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the alcohol. For the first time in years, I felt truly respected. Not just tolerated or humored, but genuinely respected by people whose opinions mattered to me. Mick appeared beside me with a fresh beer. "So, what's next, boss? Back to business as usual?" I thought about it. The business was solid, my reputation in town was better than it had ever been, and I was finally free of a marriage that had been slowly poisoning my life for years. "You know what?" I said. "I think I might take a vacation. Maybe drive up to Nova Scotia, do some fishing, clear my head." "Sounds good. You've earned it." I looked around the bar at all the friendly faces, at the people who'd supported me through this whole ordeal. This was my town, these were my people, and this was my life, built on honest work and genuine relationships instead of lies and manipulation. Ivy was probably packing her car right now, preparing to slink out of town in defeat. Owen was already gone, his business in ruins, and his marriage destroyed. Their reputations were in tatters, their futures uncertain. And me? I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by people who valued loyalty and integrity over money and status. I raised my beer to the crowd and smiled. "Happy birthday to me,"